Welcome to Wire Guild. This tutorial is a rose ring tutorial and I'm going to show you sort of 3 different ways of making it. So you're going to need, just for the rose, 0.8mm 20 gauge round wire, a 6mm Rivoli, that's a Swarovski Rivoli stone, a 6mm snap set or a Bezelite if you prefer, 4 6.5mm jump rings. When we get to the one with the leaves, you'll also need some finer wire for binding. And if you want to do it as a solitaire, but with a gemstone, you're going to need some finer binding wire too. So I'm just getting myself some 0.8 or 20 gauge round wire. I've got my little Rivoli out and I'm just, there we go. And that's the snap set I'm going to use. Like I say, if you prefer to use a Bezelite, you can do. Bezelites come from Fire Mountain Gems. Snap sets all over the place, but I have them in the shop as well. So I've got some jump rings here. I did some chainmail and I had some jump rings left over, so they're one of those. And a 6.5mm, as you can see, passes quite neatly over the top of the setting, and we need it to do that. Now, the reason I'm using a Rivoli, as you can see, is not just that it's very, very pretty, which it is, it's beautiful, but it's to do with its depth. If I show you a normal gemstone, you can see, if I put them sort of side by side, can you see in between my fingers? Whoops, it helps if I don't drop it. You can see how much thinner the Rivoli is rather than the gemstone. It's about half the depth. And we can't have that depth in the snap set, because when we try and put the wire through the back, the stone won't go through. So first we'll start with the jump rings. So I'm going to hold one side in my pliers and get the other side in the other pliers and twist. We don't open by forcing apart, we open our jump rings by twisting, and then we drop them. Try not to. So what I'm doing is I've opened it slightly and I'm just easing them together, because let me just show you. If I close that as it is, it's got like a gap and I can get my fingernail in. So if you just give them a tug and side by side, they don't do anything. But if you do it when the wires aren't together, you can then move them so they fit, and then the wires are actually touching. There's a little bit of tension there, and it looks neater than having a gap in your jump ring. So my second jump ring, I will hold one side of. These little bent nose pliers are really cool for doing this, but if you don't have one, normal pliers will do. So I open the jump ring up and then I've eased it together ever so slightly, and I put my first jump ring on, and then I close it back up. Get it nice and straight. There we go. I do better with my fingers. I'm not really that good with jump rings. So when you pop it down the floor, it sort of lays flat. So I'm going to open my third one. Use your pliers, Rachel. That's a good girl. Right, close that up slightly now. I've bent it just a little bit. And then I'm going to pass that through both of the rings. There you go. So both rings hang onto it. And then I'm going to close that up again. That's it. So that they meet. And then when I put that down on the table, there you go. You'll see how it's starting to sort of swirl together like a little rope. So we'll open our fourth one. You could probably just do it with 3 if you wanted, but open up and then squeeze together slightly. And then pass that jump ring through all 3. There we go. And then close it up again. Right, and then when you drop these down and you sort of whistle them, you can see now you've got this almost like a little rope has appeared. That's my swirly edges for my rose. So if I was to try and put this through there straight and then put the stone in, I won't be able to bend it because it popped the stone out and it won't go through the middle of the jump rings. So I'm going to need to bend that with my pliers. So my pliers are about the width of the setting. So let's just grip this in the middle and then bend to one side and then the other. And then let's see if that fits. There we go. Neat. Just pop the snap set in between. So it's going through the middle. This happens to be a 4-prong. Most of you will probably have 6 prongs. Now it doesn't fit right. It's not quite wide enough, so it's not going right to the bottom of the loops. So I'm just going to put the pliers in a little higher up and grip again and then squeeze down, which just makes it a little bit wider. Now does that go? Yes, that goes in. Now Rivolis are a little bit more awkward to put in than a normal gemstone because we can't put them face down because they've got a point on top. So, sorry, my wire fell out. Pop it back in, pop the Rivoli. So you're going to be really, really gentle. And you're going to put your pliers onto the top of the stone and just pop it into the snap set. There we go. Now this is as wobbly as anything and it wiggles around. But we're going to feed the 2 wires through the middle of our little rope set. Get the gemstone at the top and then ease it, twiddling about all over the place. Ease it over the top. Now sometimes these go on super easy and they drop straight on, and other times, oh, but it's worth the fiddle. So I'm just going to wiggle it and wiggle it until it just goes. I'm sort of fiddling one at a time, up and around, and then pushing with the other side until the wires clear. The jump rings are clearing the wires that are on the back that have gone through the back that we bent to get through. Now I know you're probably thinking, why on earth did you do that? Why didn't you just put the jump rings over the top of it and then slide the thing through? It doesn't work. Honest, I've tried. Right, so then you can pull your wires back straight. What that's doing is then it is holding the jump rings up against the edge of the snap set so they won't drop off to the front, because although a single one was slightly bigger than the snap set, when you've got 4 of them together it takes up that much more room. I'm just straightening that little piece of wire out there that got kinked when it went through the back, but it's alright, nobody's going to see it. So you've got, if you like, now you're just like you'd make a normal bead ring now, because you can pop that on the top, go down around your ring mandrel. Remember to measure where you need to be on your ring mandrel, and then back to the top. Oops, wrong way, that way. Round. And then you can go around underneath the jump rings so that it pulls tight there. I don't think that side's gone, no. That hadn't quite gone underneath the jump rings. I want it there, underneath the jump rings. Now, I probably used about 12 inches of wire or 30 centimeters, but that is really going to depend on how big a ring you want. If you've got teeny tiny fingers, you probably won't need that much. Then bring the wire around the shank, and I'm just flattening that down. I might go round again and pull that up. There we go. Nice and neat and flat. It's a very thin ring shank with only 2 wires. However, I'm going to show you how to get around that. So I've gone round 3 times. Now that is to give myself a little bit of, now that's the kink. Do you remember the kink right at the beginning? Don't worry about it. I'm going to cover it up. So I'm going to bring the wire through and get that wrapped around once. Close it down, bring it back. So that kink, I've just put the pliers over the top of it and straightened it. It's going to be wrapped over the top of it with this round wire anyway. However, it could, I suppose, have shown ever so slightly. So by straightening it up, you get rid of it. So I'm wrapping around the same amount of times that I wrapped on the other side. There we go. And I've got, what? Maybe 2 or 3 centimeters or 1.5 inches of wire, maybe 2 inches left over on either side. And that fits onto my finger quite nicely. And you could, if you wanted, cut the wires off and say, that's it, I've done enough. But I'm going to use these wires to add a little bit more detail. And I'm going to make a leaf to go at the side of my rose. Now I know usually start with the simplest ones and work my way up, but we're doing it a different way today. So I've gone just under halfway and I've put a bend in the wire. You can see it's just under because there's a little bit of wire just sticking out beyond where we start. I'm going to sharpen this point up by closing the pliers over the top of it, which will give me a nice sharp end to my leaf. There we go. Then open it back up again. There we go. And I've got some 0.4 or 26 gauge, I think it's 26 gauge, yeah, round wire. Now I'm actually using fine silver rather than sterling silver. The silver of the ring is sterling, but when I'm weaving, I tend to use fine silver. It's softer, a little bit more malleable, and a bit more forgiving as well. So you can wiggle it around better. And I've started off by wrapping around 2 or 3 times right in that point. And once I've done that, I've then come under and over, under, round, and I'm going round again and down through the middle, up and over the other side. So it's like a figure of 8, but instead of just going around once, I'm going twice on each side. Now there is a reason for going around twice rather than once. If you go around once and then go back, if those frame wires move at all, your binding wire that you've done your weaving with, your weaving wire, will stick out from the edge of the frame wire if the frame's been moved inwards, and it will go baggy and it will look untidy. Let's just get some shape going on with this. It's quite little, I can't quite get my finger in there, so I'm just going to use any rounded pliers would do, round nosed or those bale pliers, but it's just given me a leaf shape. So I'm going to carry around with my round twice because we want our weaving to be neat and not go baggy, and then move these out of the way, under and over the other side, and around and around. Can you see how it's a little bit difficult on this because it's kind of fiddly because it's only a little leaf, but I use my thumb and I use my index finger to push the wire up against the other weaving wires all the time. If you've ever watched anybody weave on a loom, they have like I don't even know what it's called, it probably has a proper name, but it's like a big piece of wood and they pull it hard and it sort of goes smack against the weaving, and it's to push it up tight to hold it all together. Now I don't have one of those when weaving jewellery, so what I use is my index finger and my thumb to constantly pull the wires into position. I find that it's strange. You can see my left hand is holding the piece, and all my fingers are sort of cradling around. If I've done a lot of weaving, it's not my right hand that aches. My right hand is always fine. It's always my littlest finger and my ring finger on my left hand that ache after doing lots and lots of weaving. And I think it's because of the tension that I have in my left hand when I'm holding the piece, because I'm trying so hard to cradle everything so that it doesn't move. I mean, doing something little like this doesn't really bother me, but it depends how much practice you've had of doing it. If you do find that your hands are beginning to cramp or ache, put everything down, um, wiggle your fingers around. I know it sounds stupid, but it's a little bit like making them do something different. Now we're getting very close now. So that's why I'm using my pliers to push up, because they can get in where I can't. We're nearly there. Once I've got to the point where I think that's enough, I've done enough leafy type weaving now. What I'll do is I'll wrap around it several times and just, can I get any more in? If I can get more in, I will do. I will always sort of put an extra weave across if I can think there's some space there, because you want it to be full looking. I'll push that down with the pliers. Make yourself more room. There we go. So I'm wrapping around now. I wrapped around 3 times on the inside edge, and I picked up the wrong snips. These are my old ones and the end isn't working. There we go. Snips always go at the tips before they go anywhere else. But I do have another pair, it's just they look exactly alike. I picked the wrong ones up. I'm going to smooth that end in, and I'm going to trim the other end off as well, remembering to go further down my snips because the ends aren't working, and smooth that one down as well. So I have a leaf. Now, where do I want to put the leaf? I've got this pokey little end. Let's get rid of the pokey end. I could wrap it around, but I don't want to. What I want to do is get my round nose pliers, and I'm going to take the tip of that and I'm going to curl it into a little loop which will sit over the top of the base of the leaf. Now, where do I want this leaf? Sideways a bit. Don't want it that side. No, I don't like it that side. Pop it back to this side. I want it to sort of curve around the stone a bit. I'm going to flatten that curl down that's on the bottom of the leaf because it's lifted ever so slightly, and I don't want that lifted, so I'm going to flatten that right down onto the bottom of my leaf. Now then, every ring is different as well. You can't always say, yeah, that's definitely going to be where it's, where it's right for it. Sorry, I'm just playing with the other wire because I'm giving myself, I want it to sit around the stone and it's not really doing that. So let's get some round nose pliers on it, and I'm going to grip the tip of the leaf and I'm going to curl it with, that's better. That's what I want. Now, when I push that down towards the stone, that's better. You've got this gorgeous little curl. Now, I'm going to do the other leaf in a minute or two. What I want to do is I want to show you now how to do the ring. But instead of using the Rivoli that we used to start off with, how to do it with a gemstone in. Now, right at the beginning, I showed you that the Rivoli was a much shallower stone. And obviously, if we're going to use a gemstone, you can't put the thicker wire directly through. So I'm going to show you how to do it by using the 0.4, the binding wire. So I've got my snap set and I've got my little amethyst here. Popping my snap set over the top, use the flat face of my pliers there, just going to go and it clicks into place. So that's amethyst set in a setting. And there's 4 little jump rings, and that will sit into the middle there. Away you go. Is that right? I think so. Have I got this right? Sometimes they don't lay quite right. You have to wriggle them around and throw them about, but they usually get there in the end. Do you remember when I said that you couldn't pass the thicker wire through the back like that? Well, sometimes it's possible if you've got your snap set in and your little jump rings over the top. Sometimes it's possible when using finer wire to actually get the finer wire to go in from the back. And if you can, it makes it a little easier. Let's see. It doesn't always work. In you go. Go on, come out. Depends on the depth of the stone, and usually the darker the colour of the stone, the less likely you are to get through the back. So I'm going to do it without the jump rings being in place. Because I'm using finer wire, I'm going to use 2 pieces, and I'm going to go through either side of the stone. Like I said, this will work just the same on a bezel-like setting as it will on a snap set. But also you could buy the sew-on settings that Swarovski do, and you could pop it through one of those, or you could use a bead, and you could put your wires through a bead. So I've got 2 wires either side, so when I get those doubled over, it's going to look like 4. And bring them down quite tight and pop that through the middle of my jump rings. Hang on a minute. There we go, that's the middle, I think. I think that's the middle. Alright, and then this should be slightly famous last words. This should be slightly easier than using the thicker wire, because of course there's less for it to have to get over the top of. You know, I don't think these jump rings are laid right. I mean, it takes a certain amount of fiddling to get these on, but if you're taking too much fiddling like this, it could be that you haven't quite got them neat. So if you pop them on the table and just wriggle them back into their little rope thing, it's easier to do when they're sat down. And then back through with the wires, and then it should, there we go, just pop up. Lovely. Now then, what to do with this one? That's such a pretty little element. You could use it in all sorts of things. They look great fastened to hair grips and put in the hair, especially if you do wedding things. They look lovely as a hair ornament. But you could add them to pendants, you could add them to a chain, you could, all sorts of things. You know, only limit is your imagination. So I've got my 10 to 12 inches of 0.8 wire, and I'm going to go around my mandrel once, pull it down a bit, twice. So I've still got 2 wires on the back, and I've got my flat area on the front. I'm going to take my stone, pop it in the middle at the top, sit. Doesn't want to because that's just slipping slightly. Let me get that better in my left hand. Pop that on, and I'm going to wrap the 2 wires around the stem that's sticking out, the end of the wire if you like. Go around, and that's going to anchor our gemstone and its setting onto the top of the ring. Now exactly the same way as before, making sure, come here, that's it, back in the middle. And then I'm going to wrap these around underneath the jump rings. I've got my finger on the top. I know it makes it difficult for you to see, but just make sure it holds it in place. And wrapping around a couple of times. So I have all these loose wires as well as the others, and what I'm going to do, pull that so that it's aside and take it round through the middle of the ring, because I want this all anchored in place. Come here, that's it. And the same on the other side. Nice and tight up to the ring. So this is really just how to give you the option of using a gemstone instead of using a Rivoli. Now then, hello you. Move that a bit closer. Now, I just want to show you something a bit different. I could just finish this off and it would be a plain one, but I'm going to show you something a little bit different. This makes it look more like a solitaire. So I'm just wrapping my fine wire, get on, around and around our thicker wire. And I've gone around quite a few times. You've got the both pieces and I'm going around together. Now I'm going to trim those off. I've probably wrapped around 5 or 6 times and then smooth that end down with my pliers. You see how I twist to make sure it smooths. And come here, let's have the other wire. So around. So what you're doing is you're building up layers of stability. We wrapped around the wires, but then we wrapped those wires around the stone. We then put the wires around the shank of the ring through the middle, and then we're wrapping the fine wires around them again. Gives a nice texture to the wire as well, because you get to see that. Now, let's do something twiddly. I like twiddles. So I could go around the ring again if I want to, but I'm not going to. So I've just bent back on itself, and then I'm coming up as if I'm creating an infinity symbol or a figure of 8, and I'm going to wrap back with the other one. So I've got a little loop where it's bound, a slightly bigger loop with the plain unbound wire. Let's just straighten that in. That's just a little piece of the finer wire that was sticking up. Smooth that down. That looks quite nice at the side. It just gives it a little bit of a wiggle there. You could put some swirls in, some curls in. You might want to add a bead to that wire and then wrap that around the shank again. All sorts of things you can do with this. It's just to give you an idea of how you can set a gemstone in rather than a Rivoli, and then how you can finish it off. So let's see if I can get this matching. So what did I do? I went over that way. That's it. And then down. And I curled back and round. Yeah. When you put a design, curls, twiddles, bead, whatever, at the side of the stone like this, what you're doing is you're giving it like a slope down into the ring, which always looks nice and attractive. It helps the stone at the top, or whatever design you've got at the top, settle into the ring as a whole. So it doesn't poke upwards and look like it's, you know, you remember those drawings that we all did of diamond rings when we were kids, where the diamond was about 4 times bigger than the ring itself and it stood up in the air? It helps with that. So that's really kind of sweet. I'm just wriggling everything, getting it into place. If you bent the ring in any way around the edge, slide it back onto the ring mandrel to get your shape right. But that's really cute. I mean, it's a little skinny round the back, but I'm going to show you how to cue that. So back to my one with the leaf. Now put that out of the way. Start again. So the leaf's gone to one side. I'm still thinking about that. And I've got another Rivoli with thicker wires set through, and I want to show you how to thicken that shank up, because all we've seen is two really skinny shanks, and I want you to show you how to do it thicker. So sorry, I'm a little bit out of shot. Just trying to get it all in. You see how little wire I've got because I've gone round more times, and I just need to bring that around underneath. So I've got 4 wires on the back. I have taken the ends of the wire underneath the jump rings. Let's just tuck that round. I'm taking the end of the wire because I still use the same amount. I still use the sort of 10 to 12 inches, which is why I don't have much left at the end. Sorry, I am out of shot again. Let me just get my hands back in. All I'm doing is actually I'm wrapping that tiny piece of wire around, and I'm getting it fitted down onto the base. I've moved my camera setup and I didn't realise that it must be closer to me than normal, so my hands are further away. I honestly not doing anything that interesting. I'm just bringing the wires around as you saw when we did the first one, and really as we saw when we did the second one as well. Those ends are coming round and they're being pressed down. There we go. So the ring is stable, and after cutting off the edges, so you can see there what I did, and just tightening that down again once I've trimmed them and bringing them close together. You could wear the ring as is, but if you're wearing it for yourself, it would be absolutely fine to do it like this. But I have found that when selling them, customers are a little bit funny about this. So I'm just going to pop this back on the ring mandrel. Straighten the stone up slightly. There we go. Neaten that up. If you give it a twist, it'll sort of tighten it. Now I've taken the ring off and I've put it on the other way around, because obviously with a tapered ring mandrel, you push it on too far one way, all you're doing is you're stretching the wires that are nearest the biggest end. So you need to take it off and turn it around and do it again. Bit little, definitely for me, but I've got fat fingers, so it don't matter. Lovely, and you could wear it yourself fine. I'm just going to take those edge bits in a bit. I want them a bit neater, so either side, and just ease that binding in. Now what I was saying is, when I'm selling, I have found that people prefer a ring that is bound to one where you can actually see the wires going around the ring. If you don't mind, just leave it as it is, but like I said, this is going to go into stock for me and it will be sold. So if it's going into stock, it needs to have the shank bound with half round wire. So I'm using 18 gauge half round, but you could use 21 either. Actually, you could use any half round wire that you happen to have handy to bind it. I have seen people bind with square wire, but I wouldn't advise it. It's very difficult to do, to keep the square sort of parallel all the time. Each time to come round, it's difficult. So I've cut myself a piece of 18 gauge off. It probably measures about 15 inches, something like that, which is about 40 centimeters. And I bend it right in the middle, and I bring it into the middle of the ring. There, with my bending. Hold the edge, and I come around. Flatten down with my pliers. There is a skill set video regarding binding. If you want to have a look at that, it might give you a little more sort of hints and tips, but I'm just going to keep going around and around. The main thing is to watch for is that your wire does not turn itself the other way up. With half round wire, you have a flat face and you have a domed face. So what you want is the domed area is to be the outside, and the flat is to be the inside. If it's easier, use pliers to bend it round and press. But your 4 wires that have created the ring itself are laying flat at the moment, and that's what you want to maintain. You're trying to make it look like you've got a flat band going down the bottom of the ring. If you put your binding wire around and you pull as hard as you can because you want to get it tight, your wires will slip and slither and produce a little clump, which is no good. You don't want a clump because then you're just going to end up with a wibbly wobbly sort of round shank. Now I speeded this up because there's nothing more boring than watching me bind a ring. Actually, to tell you the truth, there's nothing more boring than binding rings. But my youngest son is brilliant at binding and loves to just sit there and do it, and I often let him because he's really neat and he's really good and he doesn't mind doing it. That's awful, isn't it? Child slave labour. So I'm just keeping going, right, working from one side and then the other side for a bit. I press down with my pliers to make sure that it's neat and just keep whizzing around and around until the whole of the underneath of the ring is covered with the binding wire. If binding really isn't your thing and you don't like doing it, believe me, do a couple of rings and you'll get the hang of binding. It is one of those things that is so repetitive that after you've done it a few times, your hands tend to do it on their own and it doesn't really, So let's just see, I'm nearly up the top corner by one side. So I'm going to move around to the other side and just keep whizzing on that side. You see how my left hand stays really quite stationary? That holds the ring and supports while the right hand does the majority of the work. Okay, so we're at the end. I've already snipped one side off. I can probably get another wrap in there. You can see I've got a little bit left over. I probably could cut myself less when I'm binding, but when I have done, I've run out and then I've had to add a piece in, it looks messy. So we trim that off. I've trimmed off on the top and I've smoothed that down. Now this is the look that my customers prefer. The shank is much thicker, more stable. It looks great. It looks finished. It looks more professional, if you like, than having the wires on show. So that's the absolute bog standard plain rose ring. But if you remember, we've got one with leaves to go back to. So I'm just going to create the other leaf now. This is often the way I work, and it's how designs progress. I will start with one design and make it, and then something will happen and it'll change and it'll go to another, which is why I deliberately made this tutorial like that, so you can see the way, even though it isn't really the way that this one did progress now, it progressed like this probably a couple of years ago, but it's the same thing. So I wanted you to see how that happens and use it in your own work. If you're halfway through a piece and you suddenly think, if I'd have only done this to it, go on, do it now, because believe me, if you finish the original one and then go back to it, you're going to forget what it was that you were meant to do that you didn't do because you've been finishing this one off. So I've created my leaf shape with my other wire. It's slightly smaller because the wire was slightly shorter. But it's a case of don't worry. It'll still look like a leaf and it'll look like a real leaf. I've put a curl in my excess thicker wire at the base of the leaf. I chopped all the weaving out because you've seen me do that before. And I'm just going to finish off the wire where we started. So wrap that round and trim it off and then just smooth it down. This is a smaller leaf and actually I quite like it exactly where it is, just stuck out, because when you wear that onto your finger like that, it will just sit over the other finger. What I I've also got drops there. What I don't like is this shank because it only has 2 wires and it's very thin looking. It's not going to give any sort of perceived value when it comes to selling. So I got my 18 gauge round wire and I have bound the whole of the ring. You didn't need to watch me do that again, did you? So I'm putting this back onto the mandrel because when you bind the wires and there's only two, it does sort of misshape it. Well, it does when I do it anyway. So I'll put it back onto the mandrel and ease it down. Oh, it's so pretty. I like this one. And we'll just straighten that shank up. There. It's lovely, is that one? And then you can wear that quite comfortably. One little leaf coming round and one sticking out the other way. Kind of cool. And there's our absolutely plain one. And there's our solitaire, which I will bind the shank of so that you get your fancy bits and then it'll be bound. So 3 different rings. Same idea using the jump rings. All just a little bit different. That binding that's on the side there will go on to the other one. And that's the thicker one, all done and bound. But I really like that. It's a really, really pretty design. That one's worked out particularly well. And I really hope that you enjoyed watching it and that you will enjoy making your own rose rings. So thank you very much for watching. Happy wrapping. And remember, there's more tutorials that you can be streamed in HD at wireguild.com. Thanks. Bye.